Hi, I'm Rachel from 7 and All, and today I am going to be answering a whole bunch of questions about homeschooling gifted learners. If you're new to this channel, I am a second-generation homeschooler, and I love to make nerdy homeschool videos here on YouTube. So if you like that kind of thing, definitely stick around and subscribe. And when I'm talking about this topic of gifted learners today, I'm not talking about it from the point of view of being an expert with a degree or some sort of situation like this. I'm talking about it from my own personal experience of growing up homeschooled while also having this type of wiring in my brain. And I'm also talking about it just from a place of passion. I want gifted learners. I want gifted kids to be able to have a good experience in their homeschools. And I also want parents who are homeschooling gifted kids to not feel as alone, to not feel totally alone or totally misunderstood, as I know that you can feel when you're dealing with these very unique and special learners in your homeschool. So you guys asked a whole bunch of questions. I'm going to get to as many as I reasonably can get to and try to be pretty efficient with these. But let's get started. I will leave timestamps in the description down below if you're looking for a specific question. Now, first of all, someone asked, should you pursue formal testing to identify giftedness, or should you rely on intuition, common sense as the parent? And here is where I'm really gonna say it depends. I am a homeschooler. I love homeschool. And I love that homeschool gives us the ability to adapt to the needs of the specific child. So I do think when you're fully homeschooling, you don't really need the testing so much. I would more see official testing and getting official labels and that sort of thing as necessary when you're trying to get services or benefits or help from a system that requires that testing to be done. So again, I'd say it depends. If you're really just going the homeschool route and you know that you can adapt to meet the needs of your child, it kind of doesn't matter how they test. You just adapt to meet their needs. And then number 2 was a very good question. How would you define a gifted learner versus a smart one? And this is a really good thing to make a distinction between, and it's not to say one is better or worse than the other. One might be harder. So I would first say, and this is what my mom says based on her own experience, if homeschooling your child is super easy and super smooth and no drama, and you just teach them their lesson and they learn their lesson and then go off to play and everything's great, and they learn things quickly, you probably have a smart child, a typical bright child, normal, that nothing too crazy going on. However, if your homeschool is not going that smoothly, if it's not fitting that picture perfect image that you planned out, if things have bigger emotions, if there's a little more drama, if you're feeling like you're being pulled along by your child and you don't even get to be the leader and you don't even really get to make the plans because your child's just off on their own race, that's more when you're probably dealing with giftedness in your homeschool. So if you can kind of understand those differences, there is great variety that can be categorized under the gifted umbrella. There are kids who are 2E, which it stands for twice exceptional. There may be gifted in some areas, and there may be behind, delayed in other areas, or struggle extra in other areas. There's different strengths within giftedness and different passions and bents within giftedness. Some are going to be very much angled towards math or sciences, and others toward languages or different areas. There's going to be gifted kids who are more on the underachieving side. They can do so much more, but they don't want to. They just want to put the minimum level of work into pretty much everything they do. There's also going to be gifted kids who struggle a lot with perfectionism, and I have a video on dealing with perfectionism in your homeschool, which could apply to anyone who's struggling with perfectionism, because that is a problem. Another thing that tends to go along with giftedness is sheer intensity. Intensity of energy, intensity of feelings and emotions, opinions, and ideas. intensity. Something to keep in mind. So I was also asked, what are early signs of a gifted learner? So signs that might appear very early on and before they're actually school age or doing schoolwork. One sign can be, that often does come up, is being extremely verbal at a young age. Having a lot of words, having a lot of sentences, before maybe a year old, being the kind of child who's explaining life to their parents, when they're a year and a half old, and explaining how things works, sharing their opinions and ideas. Children who, as very young toddlers, are kind of trying to take charge of the day, lead the day. They have an agenda. They're gonna do this, they're gonna do this, they're gonna do this. These can be some signs of giftedness, just this kind of odd intensity that they don't really have time to just be a baby because they're taking over the world. So then I was asked, what is different about homeschooling gifted learners other than just going at potentially a more advanced pace? Great question again. So one thing I mentioned, normally as parents, we expect to be leading our homeschool. So we expect that we make a plan and, we're not gonna 100% follow the plan, but we're generally-ish gonna follow the plan. This is more when you find out, wait, your child already made a plan and is already doing the plan. Or you were not maybe ready to be starting school yet at all, or you weren't ready to be starting this level of school at all, but your child is very ready and they're pulling you, they're pushing you, and they're leading you versus you leading the child. That can be one of the differences. Another difference is that you might find out that doing schoolwork and presenting academic challenges actually helps your days to be a little bit more peaceful and helps with managing the big emotions, managing the intense energy and intense opinions and ideas. This is a fairly common experience of parents homeschooling gifted children, that they find these gifted kids are not necessarily going to be the easiest and most laid back kids. And they might actually find that having a mental challenge, having the mental stimulation of more schoolwork than you would normally give a child at that age actually really helps with managing their emotions, with helping them to self-regulate throughout the day. They need that academic challenge. They need their brains to be stimulated because they don't handle being bored well. And this can conflict with a lot of the typical advice that you're given, which is just hold off on teaching your kids too much stuff. Just hold off on teaching them to read. Just wait, give them time to be kids, give them time to be bored. But you might see a gifted child that just really struggles with being bored, that really struggles with their brain not being fed, with their craving to learn and to learn harder and harder stuff not being met. So you will find with gifted children that you're probably going to have to not follow the typical homeschooling advice of doing minimal amount of academic learning. If you give them a minimal amount of academic learning, they're going to be like, what's this? You expect me to be satisfied with this? So that, I would say, is one of the big differences. Another question says, it seems like gifted learners get bored easily because the material is too easy. Any tips for staying in the sweet spot of providing enough of a challenge without overwhelming the student? And my suggestion would be to err on the side of challenge. This is very much how my brain works. Boredom is the worst possible thing. Being taught something you already know is an insult. So I would err on the side of challenge, but to deal with that overwhelm and to make sure that that's not becoming an issue is to make sure that you are teaching executive functioning skills, problem-solving skills, teaching the skills needed to approach challenges without becoming overwhelmed. So maybe those are skills like, how do you break up a big problem into small pieces? How do you find out what you need to know to do this new skill or solve this new problem? How do you ask for help and figure out the help that you need to get the information you need to solve this challenge? So with a gifted child, I definitely lean on the side of offer a challenge. Don't shy away from challenging them. Many of us thrive with challenge, but remember to explicitly teach those skills for facing challenges without being overwhelmed by them. So another question I got asked is for tips on how to adjust a curriculum to meet the needs of a gifted child. So I do have a video with curriculum recommendations for gifted learners, and in that video I specifically talk about pain points that can come up in curriculum, and I talk a little bit about how to address those pain points. So you might want to check out that video on homeschool curriculum for gifted learners. But in general, I would really say be very willing to think flexibly. And I would never say to remove every single pain point from your curriculum or to take out everything that your child doesn't enjoy or doesn't want to do. I don't think that's good for anyone's character, any child or adult's character, to be like, no, you only have to do whatever you enjoy and whatever you like doing. So I do think we always need to have some element of pain points, some element of things that we don't like so much in our schoolwork and in our lives and in every aspect of life. But we also don't want to overload on that unnecessarily. Let's try to have our pain points exist with purpose, not purposeless pain. So with you being able to closely observe your child, really stay in touch with what they know, what they can do, and what they've mastered, that's going to help you a lot with knowing what to remove from the curriculum. If you can look at the curriculum and you see this whole involved hands-on activity to help your child master and remember this thing that they've learned, but you actually know my child's already mastered it, they're gonna remember it for the rest of their life because they have a perfect memory, so they don't really need to do this, then just take it out. You don't need to do it. Review, lots of curriculums include lots of review opportunities because many children need them, but you also gotta remember there are going to be children that don't need to review. Time wasting tends to be a big trigger for the gifted learner. They can get very frustrated and very impatient with time wasting. Now, we do need to build our patience, and our children do need to build their skills with patience. But again, try to make the time wasting on something that's worth it, not on just for the heck of time wasting. Another tip for adapting curriculum to meet the needs of a child is identify what your child really loves to do and really thrives with, and include a lot of that. Include a really good dose of that. So for me, I loved reading books. I loved learning from reading books. Anything where I got to read, I was just a happy camper, and I learned extremely well from anything I read. I don't really like videos, and I was growing up in the 90s, so you know there weren't that many learning videos anyways back then. But if I was growing up today, a child like me, I would say, we're not really gonna rely on video-based learning, we're gonna rely on book-based learning, because a book, you can read it at your own pace. And that's so much more fun than watching a video where they waste so much time. I realize the irony of this as I am making a YouTube video. I also loved, not like dumb crafts, but I really loved intricate handicrafts. So when I see like Sunlight's lap book sets that they have nowadays, I would have absolutely loved that as a child. The intricate precision crafting and cutting and taping and coloring and all of that, that's the kind of thing that I really enjoyed and was always doing constantly on my own, was intricate handicrafts. So those types of things I would include a lot for a child like me. My son loves math worksheets. He enjoys numbers in general, but more so than games and so on, he likes just having a worksheet to fill in all the answers as fast as he can. So I give him more math worksheets than I probably would give to the average 5-year-old. Okay, I did get a specific curriculum question. In your opinion, would the pace of All About Reading be too gentle for a seemingly gifted reader? I, having used All About Reading, with a child who's not, I wouldn't say is a gifted reader, but is pretty quick to catch on to reading, I don't use every part of it. I think All About Reading is very, very adaptable to different paces and different needs. However, it's also possible that All About Reading might be overly expensive and overkill for a gifted reader, if that makes sense. And also, I would be very careful to choose the level carefully. If you already have a child that's reading at a certain level, I would not, a gifted child that's reading at a certain level, I would not go back a level to fill in gaps, because that is a path of pain for both of you. I would not go back to filling gaps. I would just, if there is any gap, teach it. If there is any phonetic gap, teach it as it does come up. Learning to read was an area where I was specifically very talented from a young age. I basically went from learning the alphabet, learning basic sounds, to reading classic novels. And I was my mom's first child, so she didn't really realize how weird that was, that I didn't really ever have a stage in early chapter books, early readers, or anything like that. So that was a little, maybe not the best example of how to be a firstborn homeschooled child. So yeah, I think any curriculum can be adapted, and All About Reading is a great curriculum, but it might be overkill or might be unnecessary depending on where your child is at with reading. Okay. Next question is about pacing. How would you pace a child who is 6 years old doing 3rd or 4th grade level subjects so that they aren't overwhelmed by more, as they don't have the proper maturity, but they can and want to do more? And I've talked about this in other videos, but my answer when it comes to pacing the young gifted learner is to focus more on seeing what you can do to go broad with their education than necessarily always going up. Like, you are going to have to go up. You can't keep them doing math that they already know how to do. You can't keep them reading those stupid early readers when they can already read novels, you know? You can't do that. But you can help fill that craving for more learning in a variety of ways, doing way more subjects than you typically would do with a 6-year-old. You can help fill in that time because, okay, they finished their 3rd grade math lesson and they're 6 years old and they finished it in 10 minutes. What else are you gonna do with the rest of the day? You have to fill it in. So some of my ideas for young learners are always include instruments. Learning how to play an instrument can be a great skill that challenges both the mind and the body. I played the piano growing up. Handicrafts can be another good one. I loved any and every detailed handicraft that took a lot of time and focus and challenged me. I did a lot of embroidery. I really am drawn toward fiber type crafts, cloth. I have a sewing machine. I love even designing my own clothes, back in the days before I was very busy with small children. But I've had a lifelong love of handicrafts, and that's something you can incorporate for young children. There's so many handicrafts to choose from. Then also, another one of my favorite recommendations is language, a second language or a third language. Languages are just awesome. They're awesome challenges to the brain. When I was in early elementary, I was doing Latin at probably about 7 years old because, that was about the thing back then, the language that every homeschooler learned. I actually tend to recommend living languages because I do have a passion for people being able to love their neighbor by speaking their language. So you can incorporate a second language, or if your family already speaks 2 languages, you can incorporate a third language. The sky is the limit with these kids. You can include art classes, you can include geography classes, you can include any kind of elective class to help satisfy that curiosity without necessarily just thinking, okay, up to the next level, because your child might not be ready to write paragraphs yet. Even if they understand it, they might not physically be there yet. All right, the next question is how to help your gifted kid in the area they do struggle with, since they're not used to struggling. Struggle is so important for character building. And yes, gifted kids might be very much used to finding almost everything in life easy, or most things in life easy. So when they bump up into a struggle, whether that's an academic struggle or a non-academic struggle, it can really shake them because they haven't had as many opportunities as other kids might have to be like, wow, this is really hard, but I can push through the hard and I can do it. So I would walk with your child in the struggle, and because gifted kids are usually cognitively able to understand these things pretty well, I would literally talk about how struggle and experiencing hard things and figuring out how to do hard things is actually really healthy for them and is really good for them and good for building their character and who they are. So I would have those very open conversations with them, and then I would come alongside and I would work on step by step building the skills needed. And when they have had that rare experience of struggling, facing the struggle, getting to the other side of the struggle and mastering something that was hard for them, I would really celebrate it. I would really talk about it with them. And then when we face future struggles with them, I would bring up that memory that they now have of, hey, I did face something hard and I did figure out what I could do about facing that hard thing, because struggle and doing hard things is just so important for building their character. All right, how can you navigate other people constantly saying you're ruining their childhood by providing academic challenge? And here's where I would just say, realize that the needs of gifted kids are widely misunderstood. Those who have not experienced this themselves are just probably not going to believe you. For some reason, our own experiences are the most powerful and the most memorable thing to all of us, pretty much. So parents who their experience has been that their boys aren't really ready to learn how to read till they're 8 years old, they'll start thinking all boys aren't ready to read till they're 8 years old, and they won't believe you, and they'll think that you're this crazy tiger mom if you ever mention anything like my 3-year-old is just copying words out of books, I don't know why, and taught themselves to write, or whatever it is, or taught themselves to read, because gifted kids do that kind of stuff. They won't believe you. And it's not fair, but I think it's just the reality that these kids are special and they are misunderstood. You're gonna feel misunderstood as a parent, and realize that your kids are also gonna feel misunderstood as well, because people in the homeschool community will be really supportive when you talk about different learning challenges and when you talk about the need to take things slower, to go at a child's pace, but they'll be a lot less supportive if you're talking about the need to go at a child's really, really fast pace. There just isn't as much understanding of it. This is why I make these videos, to say, hey, you're not alone. You're not misunderstood by everybody. You might be misunderstood by a lot of people, but I'm here for you. I see you. I know it's real. You're not fake. You're not lying. But there can be this idea that if you ever say, oh, my child's gifted, that, oh, it's like you're bragging or you're looking down on people. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, that having a brain that's wired to learn quickly is not a moral good. It's not a thing with moral value, one way or another. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, just understood. Yeah, a lot of people are not going to understand this, but you can still do what your child needs you to do, regardless of whether it's understood or not. And maybe send them my videos so they can be like, I don't know, someone else to be like, hey, this is real, okay? It's not imaginary. I was asked, what are my top curriculum suggestions for each subject, especially in like gifted math or science? I don't really necessarily want to recommend specific curriculums, because I think there's just so much variety. There are so many good options for curriculums, but the big thing is going to be, how do you implement it? And there are going to be curriculums that are just spectacularly bad choices for gifted learners. In general, I can tell you more what to avoid. I do have that video on gifted homeschool curriculum, and I do mention some curriculums specifically made for gifted kids, like Art of Problem Solving, like Beast Academy. There are a lot of options, but you can very much adapt curriculums. A few things to avoid, I would say, is avoid curriculums being labeled as gentle, or even parent-led is something that I would tend to avoid, because once a child can read and they have the basic fundamental skills, gifted kids often like to be much more independent. They don't like to have to wait on their busy parent to come and give them their lesson. So a curriculum that can be done fully by the child themselves might save you a lot of headaches in the long run. But definitely avoid those gentle, definitely avoid those curriculums that tend to have a reputation of already being like a grade or two level behind. You probably can already have a couple of curriculum names popping into your mind right now. But the ones that are more describe themselves as rich or ambitious, in-depth, those are the kind of words that you want to look for, because we don't like surface level. We don't like, you can give a science curriculum to a kid and be like, that's it? I already know all this stuff. Like, I want something that's actually going to teach me something new. And another question is, how do you deal with pushback or not wanting to do lessons for a topic they are gifted in? My first question would be, do you know for sure that you're actually teaching them something that they don't already know? So identify that. If you are teaching them something they already know, that could be one of the issues. But there are also kids, and they are immature kids with big opinions and ideas, and they think they know more than you, but there's actually probably some areas in which they don't know more than you. And they might not realize that actually this skill set we're working on right now that you don't think is important, I as a parent actually do know that this is important for you to be able to move on to more interesting things. So you're gonna have to trust me, you're gonna have to trust our relationship, and you're gonna have to trust that we do have to do this work so that we can move on to the more exciting stuff you do wanna do. So that's really what I would say, is identify, wait, is this stuff that they know or don't know? Figure that out. Once you figure that out, oh, this is stuff they really don't know, but they're still pushing it back, then I would say it's probably more of a character issue, and that's when I would have those conversations and lean on, this is something you're gonna have to trust me. You're gonna have to trust mom. This is something you need to know in order to be able to move on and do what you really want to do. So we're gonna work on this. Trust me. We're gonna work on the character issues and the heart issues at stake, and that's gonna allow us to learn this information or learn this skill we need to go on to more exciting things. Then I got a whole bunch of questions about how to balance interactions and relationships in learning when you have gifted children and more typical learners in the same family. Got a lot of questions about this, so I think this is something that a lot of families are dealing with, and yeah, it makes sense that a lot of families would be dealing with, and it's something that I do think you should be very intentional about. So I have several big thoughts and big ideas about this. So people were asked, how do you not let the average, the more typical learners feel dull-witted around the gifted child? And how do you not make the gifted child feel like they have to do more work than their siblings do? First of all, I'm going to say, even you, the parent and the adult, might occasionally feel dull-witted around your gifted child. It's highly possible. These little brains just work so fast that can just be a feeling that you have around people like this. In that case, I would identify, is your gifted child actually putting their siblings or you or other people down and being mean? Because gifted kids can be mean. Are they being mean? Are they putting other people down? Are they looking down on other people? Or is it just simply that they exist? Because it's really not fair to feel, it's really not fair to blame the gifted child for simply existing and making you feel dim-witted. That's not a bad thing. Like, they have to be free to exist, and they have to be free to be who they are. However, they are not free to put down other people or to use their brain as a weapon against other people. And I'll talk more about that in a bit. Then I would strongly, and this isn't all of parenting, I would strongly discourage any kind of idea that life should be fair. And this is in regards to, oh, I have to do more schoolwork than my sibling does. Life is not about fairness. Fairness is not a goal that's worth pursuing. Justice is something else. Justice is worth pursuing. Fairness is not a worthwhile goal to have. It's not something we should be encouraging our children to insist on or pursue. Fairness is not what we were created for. We are created for to desire justice, but not fairness. because fairness actually doesn't ever end up being fair. You don't give all your children the same thing every day. You give them what they need. You nurse your baby, but you give your big kids real food, like cereal, eggs, whatever it is. You don't give them all the same breakfast to make it fair. You give them what they need. So I would bring up real examples about why fairness is not something worthy of pursuit or craving or desire, but that we're giving different children what they need. And explain to your gifted child, maybe if you're giving your gifted child more schoolwork because they thrive with more schoolwork for self-regulation, explain that. Be honest with them. Tell them they should be able to understand this. But strongly discourage any comments or pursuit of fairness, because it's not a worthwhile goal. So I got questions about basically describing how the relationship between a gifted child and a more typical learner, their parent is worried that resentment is going to be building because of the interactions between them. The gifted child is worried that the younger brother is doing less schoolwork, or she's making comments about, oh, this should be easy for you, it's easy for me. Things like that, things that could potentially hurt their relationship in the long run. This is a worthwhile thing to be thinking about. I would teach all of your children that their relationships with their siblings are a worthy goal. They are something worth investing in and pursuing. And I tend to be someone who lays down pretty strict rules of we are always respectful to our siblings and everyone in our family. We speak respectfully to others. We do not tolerate, we do not encourage, we do not laugh at comments that put other people down. So I would not say that it's okay to make comments like this should be easy for you. When a child is struggling with something that's hard for, that's not a considerate comment. It is not the gifted child's responsibility to slow themselves down or to hide what they can really do to make other people more comfortable. However, it is their responsibility to be gracious to other people, to not use their brain as a weapon to hurt other people, and it is their responsibility to use their gifts for good and not for evil. I know the temptation for evil can be there, but you are called to use your gifts for good and not for evil. In reality, learning quickly, having a brain that's just wired to remember everything you've ever learned, or wired to be able to figure out any puzzle. Learn this giftedness, it's not a moral good. It's not like this is something better, and then if you struggle with learning math, that is a moral bad. It actually does not have a moral value. It's like blue eyes and brown eyes. Blue eyes are not better than brown eyes. It's like being left-handed or right-handed. Neither one is better. It's a characteristic. It's part of who you are, but it is not a moral value. It's not, oh, right-handed people are better than left-handed people. No, or the other way around. So your gifted children are not of higher moral value than your non-gifted children. Neither are your non-gifted children of higher moral value than the gifted ones. It's like curly hair, straight hair. It's a characteristic, and it might impact your life. Being left-handed definitely does impact my life. I have to find different ways to work with different things, different tools, left-handed, left-handed tools, left-handed strategies. You do have to find strategies, and it is going to impact your life to have gifted wiring in your brain, but it's not a moral good, and it's not something that we should be saying, oh, like, this is better. This is what we should hope. We hope our kids come out with blue eyes. No. We hope our kids come out with gifted brains. No. This is just, if your child has this characteristic, they have this characteristic. It's part of who they are. They should understand that it's part of who they are. They should also understand if their siblings have different characteristics as well. And they should understand that every person is immensely valuable, immensely precious, and should be treated as such. And it doesn't really, it does matter how your brain works, because you have to understand that to be able to thrive in this life. But it also doesn't matter. It doesn't matter as far as how important you are as a person or how you should treat other people. It doesn't change that. And another sibling-related question is what to do when the gifted child is not the oldest child and surpasses an older sibling in their academics, in their skills. And I did talk about this a little bit in a previous Q&A with my mom. And her answer was that jealousy is never something that you should cater to or encourage or kind of pet and say, oh, it's okay to be jealous as a parent. So with the older child, if they're showing signs of jealousy, work on that heart issue, work on that. We should not be jealous of the way another person was created by God and the skills and gifts that God gave to another person. That's not something to be jealous of. God gave you your own set of gifts and skills and talents and your own life, your own purpose. So work on being who God created you to be. Don't worry about your sibling. With the younger sibling that has surpassed the older one, I would make sure that they're not being a brat about it, that they're not saying snotty comments, rude things. Of course, kids can be immature and they might not even realize how mean they can be at times. So really work on building that value for I can be smart, I can move fast, I can move at my own pace. I'm not gonna hide who I am, but who I am is not going to be a mean person who puts other people down. Work on really building a strong value for that. Adults have a better understanding that life is not linear and you're not always going to be further along than someone who is younger than you in any area. But I would work, young kids don't necessarily understand that, but they can if they're taught it. So I would work on teaching your kids that same thing, life is not linear. People achieve different achievements at different stages. And I would bring in examples that they've seen of that in their own life and maybe examples that didn't bother them and to help them realize that, oh, this really shouldn't bother me either. So I can think of examples from my own life that are not academic. I learned how to ride a bike at 7 years old, to ride a bike with no training wheels. My brother learned how to ride a bike at 3 years old, which meant we learned how to ride bikes at just about the same time. And he was riding his tiny little bike in circles around me on the driveway because he was faster and better at riding a bike long before I was and at a way younger age. Now, we don't need to think, oh, the older sister must learn how to ride the bike first. Then only the little brother can ride the bike. No. And another example, two of my sisters are 5 years apart in age. They both learned how to swim at the exact same time. Why? Because the older sister spent the first 4 years of her life afraid of water. Eventually she got over it and she learned to swim at the same time her tiny toddler sister was swimming. So, and that's fine, that's not a bad thing. That doesn't say anything bad about either one of them. Learning to swim, learning second grade math is not a moral value. It's not a race. You don't need to do it at one exact time. You're just gonna do it kind of when the circumstances and when your abilities allow you to. So it's not of moral value one way or another, really. If each child is working hard and doing their own work that they've been given, treating other people with respect, that's what we're asking for. It's not a race. It's not about who finishes first. In homeschool, we really need to embrace letting our children learn at their own pace, even when it's fast, but also teaching them the social skills to not be a jerk about learning something faster or easier than your siblings. All right, apart from accelerating academic learning, what aspects do you think are crucial for gifted learners? Teach them, and you might have to explicitly teach things that you didn't think you had to explicitly teach, but explicitly teach them in the areas that they struggle with or lack skills in, which might be non-academic areas. So this is kind of a stereotype, but it is also one that more fits me. Teach them social skills. Teach them, what do you do in different social situations? Teach them to value people, but then also teach them what valuing people looks like. I've joked that for me, interacting in social situations can sometimes feel like a computer running a program. If this, then that. If this, then that. But that's actually really useful. It might sound bad. It might sound bad to people who don't understand this. But if this situation occurs, then this is what you do is actually incredibly helpful. And actually there are a lot of people that could benefit from those scripts running in their brain, that would be very helped to have those programs of what to do in different social situations, and they don't have them because their brains weren't wired to understand these interactions naturally, and they were never taught these skills. So if dealing with social situations requires computer programming in your brain, that's fine. But give your children the skills that they need in areas that don't come naturally to them, and be willing to think outside of academics. Now, from elementary to high school, do you see any difference in the need of gifted kids? Yes, very much so. And I would like to give hope to all parents saying, homeschool will probably get much easier once your child has mastered all the fundamental things that you need to teach them, and once they're able to teach themselves. That was my experience. That has been an experience for many people, that once a gifted child knows how to read very fluently, once they can understand, once they can kind of manage their own education, they tend to be a little bit happier and more peaceful because they can have their own things. Also, once children become older, teenagers, and they have a lot of really hobbies and interests that they can do on their own and that don't need safety management from you and mess management from you and all the intense needs of the early years, that also tends to make things get a little easier for the parent, just because there can be a lot more independence and the child gets to go at their own pace without having to have mom there every step of the way. And the last question I got was, what about 2E? How do you nurture both sides, both the giftedness and the disability? And here is where I would say, and I feel like this is advice that applies to pretty much all parenting and all kids, is work on allowing your children to understand themselves and know themselves well. Their own person, their own ability shouldn't be a mystery to them or a stranger to them. Really work on knowing yourself, knowing this comes easily to me. I'm good at this. This is hard for me. I'm not so good at this. I have to work harder in this area. And work on understanding they should not expect of themselves. It's unreasonable to expect of themselves that everything in life will be equally easy for them. That's not true for anybody. Literally anybody in history. Never has everything in life been equal. Have they been equally good at every single subject area, every single skill that can be possibly needed in life? Everybody has areas that are easier and areas that are harder for them. With some people, it can be much more extreme. But when you understand yourself and you can accept, this is who I am. It doesn't mean I'm going to stay bad at this thing that is hard for me. It does mean I do need to work harder at it. And help them to understand that working on those weaknesses is actually a really good way to grow. Is actually a really good way to grow their character and who they are. To lean into the hard stuff and not to avoid the hard stuff. But build a value for leaning into things that are hard. All right, I hope this gave you a few things to think about. Definitely leave any of your comments, thoughts, and we can chat more in the comments down below. I'll be seeing you next time. Bye.